I think you got to find your passion. You got to find a reason. And once you find a reason for your own life, like, who are you? You know, when you get to a point where you don't have anything and you're completely, out in the open, you're like, yeah, I have no one else to blame. I have to really prove to myself that what I want to do matters. Because if it doesn't matter to me, it's not going to matter to anybody else.
Welcome to Reaching Out. I'm your host, Zack Carter. Please join me as I speak with a diverse group of people to find out their thoughts on religion, politics, and culture. All right, everybody. Welcome to Reaching Out with Zack Carter. I'm pleased to welcome the talented and gritty R. Anthony Harris today to the podcast. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for those that may not know much about you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a designer, a graphic designer. I make magazines, and I'm a very curious person about culture. I'm very curious about culture and how the stories and the people in the city connect and how it all kind of overlaps.
Okay, cool. So what brought you to Richmond originally when you came here?
Well, like we were discussing earlier, you are from Danville. I went to high school in Bassett, Virginia. Father was military, so we lived a lot of different places, and we ended up in Bassett, and I wanted to go to school in Richmond, the VCO. So in '98, I came to VCO.
Okay, very cool. And I know I watched a video on you where you kind of did a talk about your background a little bit, and you graduated, and then you ended up kind of working in a restaurant, right?
Yeah,
like a sushi bar or something?
Yeah, actually, I graduated in illustration and design, and there's not a lot of opportunities for illustrators in Richmond. And so I ended up getting out of school and working restaurants, but, designing band flyers and kind of just being part of the scene and helping out wherever I could. And I joined an art gallery called Art Space, which is now in Manchester at Plant Zero. And so I learned a little bit about the art game from there. And I ended up working on a magazine while I was just kind of hustling after school, after college was over. And I bumped into the owner of Sticky Rice, John Yamashita, and started doing some things with him. He was a master marketer. He was the first Richmond restaurant that I know of that had an actual brand. Have a really cool logo. He was giving out stickers, and he really had a kind of a lock on youth culture in the city. And so I ended up doing a magazine called Chew on This in 2003 with him, and really loved it. I just loved the idea of magazines, So when we started, I didn't know how to design a magazine, but I knew how to, or at least I had a willingness to talk to people, to interview them. To find out what they were interested in. Like, I knew a lot of out-of-work artists and struggling bands, so constant, content. And then by happenstance, again, it was like, oh, well, the magazine costs this much. Why don't I go talk to the deli that I hang out with I go once a week to go get a sandwich. Maybe they'll buy an ad. So I just went in there and talked to the guy, the owner, and he was like, yeah, why not? I'll give you $200 for that.
Okay.
And then I worked at a restaurant, and I talked to the owner about that. Just being supportive. I don't know how I came across. Probably just more energy than intelligence. Just like, it's like, hey, there are people around here that want to read about this stuff, and it makes sense if you advertise. They'll be reading the magazine, they'll see your ad, and then they'll see you as a supporter of this culture that's here.
Yeah.
It would seem like a win, like $200. I don't know if that's a big deal to you, but if you do that, that'd be great. So the mag was that first magazine, the first Chew on This, I think was $800 to print 1,000.
Okay.
By the third mag, I had sold $1,000 worth of ads.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, because I wanted to get paid, because I was like, I'm working at a restaurant. Where's my stepping off point? I want to be an artist. So all I knew how to do was grind away cooking. At least I knew I was going to eat every day. Being broke, and And then at the same time, I was like, I'm helping all my friends out because it's like, oh, my friend has an art show. Why don't we write about it? And they're like, well, who's going to write about it? I was like, I guess I will. I'm not the best writer, but we have editors to do that, right? Somebody can write better than me, take what I just mashed up and make something from it. So I just kind of fell in love with that process because I love small business. I love underground art. And I knew there was a lot here. And so I worked on that magazine, Chew on This, for a year. It didn't work out. And I did end up getting a corporate gig, making salary and everything else, and kind of did that for a year and realized that, well, it was kind of put on me. I got fired, but I'm on unemployment for the first time, which was really shocking. And yeah, I'd been in a relationship with somebody for 6 years. That was kind of like my college relationship. So it all kind of crashed at the same time. And ended up being okay, and my father passed, which was a big deal. So it was kind of like all in 6 months. I had all this happen. And now looking back, I mean, it was a time to kind of reimagine myself. It's like, okay, well, if you have nothing and no one expects anything from you, what do you want to do? Yeah. Kind of came to that realization, So I ended up hitting my friend up who owned a sushi restaurant and asking him for a job. And I took a massive pay cut. I remember the kitchen manager was like, why do you want to work here? Because I was making like 36, plus some benefits. And then it's like $8.75 an hour. Now, the important part was, if you're looking for Richmond culture, it had really centered in on a few spots, and Sticky was one of those spots, So I started working there and kind of just hanging out, and I got to know more people. I got to know more creative people, and I was making sushi, so I was eating well. And then it came time to want to do my own project. I was telling them I wanted to do another magazine. Now, I didn't ask them for money or anything. I was just like, I'm doing this while I'm, working 40, 50 hours a week here.
Yeah.
I'll have a few beers and hang out. But when I get home, I'm going to work from, my normal schedule will be from 1 until 4 or 5. And then I'd sleep until 11 or 12 and then go back to work. So it was like, because I was told the only way to get ahead is to work while everybody's working and then work while they're sleeping. And if you really want it, if you really are that dedicated and that focused, then you'll start to get ahead. So that's probably 4 or 5 years of my life like that, where I'd really had a hard time having other relationships, but I had, I'd shaved my head. I was just completely monked out. This is all I'm doing all the time,
Yeah. So you were at the restaurant during the day, and then nights and weekends, or whenever you have time off, you're just working on this new magazine that you start.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you end up calling that magazine?
RVA. RVA Mag, and I had drawn the RVA symbol. It kind of looked like a Batman symbol, because I felt like, I don't know, the city needed something positive. Yeah, and RVA made sense because it was a term that punks were using in the 80s. And it was kind of a symbol of outsider culture.
Yeah. So at the time, it wasn't as big as it is now, because you see bumper stickers everywhere that have the RVA symbol. So RVA wasn't a thing back when you started RVA Magazine. So as you're putting together this magazine, and what was the aim of the magazine itself?
Well, it's two sides. It's a business side and a cultural side. It was trying to show a slice of life. We wanted to have one punk band, and we wanted to have one hip hop act. We wanted to have one artist in every issue. Some thought pieces, kind of just random writings, and just be open to whatever. But the idea was to mash it all up, because everybody kind of had their own cliques, and everybody didn't talk. And then, and this was before Facebook. MySpace had just had come out or something, so social media wasn't a thing either. Everybody was getting their information from print media, or from the telephone poles, because everybody would put their, show flyers on that. That's how you got information. You'd be like, oh, the shows are coming up, You would hope Style Weekly or the newspaper would cover something, but they wouldn't. So there's a whole section of the culture that wasn't being represented. And it made sense to me because it's also, those publications also had priced themselves out of a lot of small business. Like mom and pop shops, like the delis and stuff. They're like, can't really afford $1,000 or $2,000 ad buys per month. But like, $250, $300, that's manageable. So it became kind of a thing on the business side, like, we can cater to, we can do this work here, but also have the support of local businesses if we get enough of them to be able to continue.
Okay. Okay, very cool. So, but from my understanding, when I was watching your talk, even though you were able to get these ads, it still wasn't funding the magazine like you would have wanted. So, didn't you have to turn to throwing parties as well as a form of bringing in revenue?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of those places that we would do or that would buy advertising would connect it with events. So, they'd want somebody from our, the RVA logo on the flyer. They want somebody there to be, they wanted us to create them business, like physically. Like, I know a DJ, so let's book that DJ over there. On Friday, they spent $300 on an ad. They're making that $300 back if it's packed, They're making a lot more money. So that was just a necessary, business thing. I mean, it was fun too. I wanted to do it. I felt like I could do it. And so I would end up making a lot of the flyers too. So I was just designing flyers for a lot of these places. I got to know a lot of the DJs, bands in town, performers. So, and that kind of fit in what we were doing anyway, because it's like, I know this band because we interviewed them. We know this DJ because he played a party for us, but then I can interview him too. So it kind of the whole thing kind of fit into like a circle, kind of fit all together. And then we just use that as leverage to go get business.
Okay, and so I know as your business is growing, did you begin to see other businesses, other organizations begin to try and take on that RVA title as well?
Yeah, my girlfriend at the time, she was telling me about RVA babysitters. I remember that really specifically. Yeah. Because it was like, what? And they're like, yeah, there's a group called RVA Babysitters, and there's RVA Bikes. It was interesting to see when small business started to get on the internet. I mean, think about the word bike. Bike.com is definitely gone. Somebody bought that.
Oh, totally.
But to make it specific to Richmond, maybe they buy Richmond bikes. But then as it became like, this is kind of the real Richmond, this is kind of the underground Richmond, this is kind of the DIY Richmond, people are like, RVA Bikes makes a lot more sense. And then it was just across the board. It was like RVA, whatever you can think of, And I remember sitting in the office and we were just like, wow, this thing, people were like, well, you should have trademarked the idea of RVA.
Yeah.
And I thought, I could do that, but then maybe the idea wouldn't spread. The idea is out there. And my take on it was, as more people started using RVA, they'd probably come to RVA Magazine. Because then, like Google search or whatever, we had RVA first, and it was like, okay, we're at the top. So it didn't really bother me that much. When they first started talking about what should the Richmond brand be, because it had been RIC, and that kind of represented like a corporate, like kind of stodgy, old boys network kind of brand.
Sure, and you're bringing in like the punk brand.
Yeah, it's like this is like punk. The idea of it. Again, do it yourself. I mean, no one's going to do it for you, kind of thing. And the magazine represented that too. It was like no one with money or any kind of corporate anything was interested in us. It was, we're doing this, and everybody that was on board working on it sacrificed a lot. A lot of time, a lot of effort. Not a lot of money there, but it felt good to all be in like a, in the same boat. Like, we're on a mission. Like the mission is to change everybody's perception of the city. Yeah. And if we can get enough people believing that the city can be something other than what it is, which at the time was, Churchill was top 3 in murder per capita. You know, the Jackson Ward, you know, where that Kroger is now, which was Carter, not Carter, starts with a C. That was one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the city, right there, Jackson Ward. I do want to say Carver, but I don't know if that's... It's been obliterated because of the Kroger and VCU, right?
Yeah.
Almost obliterated. And Broad Street it's still kind of dangerous, but it was dangerous, and Gray Street and all that stuff. So people had in their minds that this is what Richmond is. Richmond is like this drunken, underachieving. This is where people go, you know, when their dreams die, kind of thing. And you know, if you want to make it big, you go somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know, and then it was like, well, you know what, you can do whatever you want to do in a big city here. You know, you want to start a community garden, you can do that, and people will support that. You know, if you want to, you know, make your art and have a few people come to your show, that can happen. There's more galleries, and you know, get your music out. You know, like hone your craft here. Once there's a market for creativity and people can make a living, then the whole idea and the whole culture and the scene, it kind of starts to grow exponentially. But that wasn't there then, you know, 10 years ago.
And what do you think was the tipping point from RVA becoming this punk type movement, this underground movement, into it being, you know, Richmond mainstream, like mainstream Richmond, where you see these bumper stickers everywhere? What are your thoughts on what the tipping point was, how it became what it is now?
So interesting. I had worked with city organizations like Venture Richmond. You know, their job is to promote downtown. And some kids from the Brand Center came and asked me some questions about the magazine and what I thought of the culture. And then 4 months later, I got brought into a meeting with city officials, and they have the RVA bumper sticker up. You know, and they're like, we're just going to make a lot of these, and we're just going to give them away, and then we're going to allow people to customize them. You know, so that makes it their RVA. And I think they were seeing, you know, how I felt about that, because I mean they know where it came from. They knew where it came from. Like it came from not only me but other people like me. But
you kind of popularized it.
We kind of put it under one banner. You know, so again, it came up like maybe you should trademark that, and I thought, you know, if it's on every police car, every ambulance, garbage truck, you know, if suburban moms start rocking it on their cars, like, you know, I don't know how that's a bad thing. You know, who knew that it would get like it is now? You know, they're selling RV T-shirts at the Flying Squirrels. You see just normal people just so proud of it, which is great. You know, it's great to have city pride. You know, and that's kind of something that we're pushing. So I never thought it was a bad thing. But
and when I was getting ready for this interview about a week ago, I was pulling out of a neighborhood in Midlothian, and I see an RVA bumper sticker on a minivan, and I'm like, that's crazy that because the suburbs. I mean, I was talking with Kelly Lemon yesterday. We did an interview with her, and she was saying, you know, no one crosses the river. You don't cross into Richmond. Richmond doesn't come down into the suburbs, and so but you have this movement that's even extended into the suburbs, where you have, you know, the moms, like you said, that are putting it on their little minivans. So
now they're coming down and enjoying the restaurants. I think Scott's Additions is becoming the place for the suburbs to party in Richmond. I mean, with all the breweries and you know, all that, it's starting to look a little West Endy. And you know, so all these things, like, if you pay attention, they all overlap if you kind of can put the pieces together. You know, it's step one, getting people to even like the city as in general, you know, not trash it all the time. Then step two, once they take pride in it, people start investing in their own communities, and they start building stuff, and they start, like, you know, looking out for people. They start supporting each other, you know, and then it's like step three, other people from outside are interested now.
One of the things that when I interviewed Kelly Lemon yesterday about she wanted to talk about RVA, this concept of RVA versus Richmond. And so what she was saying is that she wanted to bring some critiques to the RVA movement. She said overall it's been a good thing, but one of the problems with the RVA movement is that there are groups of people that are being left behind and might even be ignored. For instance, lots of people are moving to the city because of this RVA movement, because the city is becoming better known for its culture. And what that's doing is, raising housing prices, and it's causing people that were here originally to begin moving out, to begin, gentrifying areas. I'm curious what your thoughts are on some of the negative consequences of the RVA movement, if you think there are any.
No, absolutely. And I think Kelly and I have talked about this too. Mm-hmm. I had a meeting a month ago with a businessman who is bringing a large project down to Shockoe Bottom. Mm-hmm. And it's a $100 million project. And, he runs in those circles. There's a lot of investors and entrepreneurs, a lot of money people that are interested in the culture. Mm. And he talked about the RVA, how the RVA brand has changed people's minds. Mm. And I had to talk about, the RVA brand is starting to become about the haves and the have-nots. Mm. There are people that are there's Richmond, mm-hmm. and there's RVA. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. The kind of money can plow through a lot of the culture and just sterilize it. Yeah. When you move the soul of the neighborhood out, then it's just going to look like the suburbs. Yeah. Now, also on the economic side, how do you prevent that? I'm not sure, but I think we should have a responsibility. As, these craft beer places, the restaurants, all these things that I get to enjoy, finally, I have to remember where I came from. Part of the reason why I started the mag was because I felt left out. It was I can't go to the Jefferson, I could work at the Jefferson, maybe, but it was that anger against that inequality that was part of the reason to start a magazine. You can't stop this culture, and you don't even know about it. Yeah. Because you're not even paying attention. You're just talking about money. I had a meeting with developers in Manchester. They're like, oh, we want murals here. I was like, great, you have all these great walls. You should have murals here. It's a great place. And yeah, we want murals in here so people will move in here. And I was like, that makes sense. I mean, that's part of my pitch, right? Mm-hmm. And then we're like, oh, we want specific murals. We want river murals and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's not what we do. Yeah. It's bringing artists in to create what they, of course, you get approval, but, nobody wants something just totally offensive and disturbing on their walls. Yeah. I get it. Yeah. But for the most part, it's about having an open mind to other ways of doing things, and you guys control the money, so you want to control every aspect of it. And I think that's dangerous. Yeah. As things progress and get better in Richmond, I think there is a responsibility to make sure that you can't save all poor people, but you can make sure there's opportunities. Yeah. You can make sure that there's opportunities, as things get better, that it's only 5% of it. 10% of these people get to go do cool stuff. It's oh, well, you get to do, maybe our projects, because we're successful, can help fund your projects, and it can all be interlinked. Maybe as a city, we could be an example of how that works, good city governance with ability to work with culture to develop, programs, and, that kind of give opportunity to everybody.
Well, cool. Well, I have one more question for the main interview, and then I do a little section called the bonus interview questions, where we have a little fun and just ask some goofy questions. What would be your advice for someone who wants to help change the culture of a city, since you've had a hand in changing the culture in the city?
My advice, huh?
Yeah, your advice. Why not?
Well, I think for me, I had to identify what really what needed to change, and why I was so angry. You know, I was angry because I felt like I didn't have opportunities here. You know, if I was going to make art, it was difficult to do that. I didn't like the way the city was treating the culture. You know, I didn't like how other people were talking about it. You know, everybody felt kind of negative about it. I think you got to find your passion. You got to find a reason. And once you find a reason, you know, a reason for your own life, like, who are you? You know, it really was like that. It was like, who am I? You know, when you get to a point where you don't have anything, and you're completely, you know, out in the open, and you're like, yeah, I have no one else to blame. And, you know, I still have my health. I can still do things. And if I'm not doing them, I'm not giving myself opportunities because I'm jaded, I'm angry, I'm blaming everyone else. So I had to really go through a process of that, because I guess I felt entitled.
Yeah.
You know, like I felt like, oh, you know, I have some talent. You know, that should be enough. You know, people should give me this. And then it was kind of like, you know what? I have to outwork everybody else. You know, I have to really prove to myself that what I want to do matters. You know, because if it doesn't matter to me, it's not going to matter to anybody else. You know? And it was like, this magazine's important, you know? And I'll go on First Friday and I'll stand there in the cold with, I had an oversized polyester jacket that I had taken out of my dad's closet or something, and wearing it, looking back, I don't know how I looked. You know, I looked really naive, probably, earnest. But I'm standing there with the magazines I'm trying to sell for $5 and explaining to everybody that came by, I was like, Richmond has something. It's in this magazine. You know, it's everywhere. You could, and then one by one, you know, like, we get a few fans and be like, yeah, Richmond is kind of cool. Like, cool, yeah, bring that up. You know, next time you're at a party or an art show, you know, tell somebody else that. You know, and then it was kind of like, and then, you know, and then just the kind of force of will in your own mind, like, this is important. I'm not hurting anybody. I'm actually trying to, you know, be a positive person. And I have an idea. And I would take that to the limit. You know, I would, you know, it's like, you have to show people that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to work 60 hours a week. You can come to my house anytime and I'll be working. And then if you have an idea, I'll listen to you, you know? And then you know, what does that become? It just becomes like a culmination of ideas. And then all of a sudden you have a group of people that all have, you know, that are all excited and they want to change things, you know? So that really comes from an idea and a drive.
That's cool.
To really do that.
Yeah, and I was listening to a podcast where, going off what you said, where the guy that was hosting the podcast was, and it sounds so negative initially, and then you like take a couple of days to kind of internalize it, but he's like, the world does not care about you. If you have an idea, if you have something creative, you have to make the world care. Like, you can't just assume people are going to jump on board with your idea, with your product, with your service, with your show, whatever it is. And so I think that plays right into kind of what you were saying.
Yeah, I think that's a common thread, you know, the power of the word no. You know, like, no, I'm not going to take a job just because it pays me, you know, and that's scary. You know, it's like, there's opportunities like, oh, I could take this job, or I can take this opportunity and it'd be easier for me. And then I was just like, no, you know, because that's not who I want to be. You know, I don't know exactly who I want to be, but I know that it's not that.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
I have one question.
you have one question? Okay, so OJ does have a question. What you got?
What would you say serves as your inspiration for the magazine? Or at least starting out, what was your inspiration, and do you still have those same inspirations, or what else gives you that creative spark for the magazine?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just so that in case the audience didn't hear, OJ was asking what Tony's inspiration was for the magazine, and if it's still there.
I don't know. So I got a copy of Frank 151. It's a mag out of New York, I think, or LA, and it's real small. And I remember my friend had it, you know, because I was in Bassett, you know, and you're from Danville, you know how like culturally barren it is, right?
Yeah, there's nothing out there.
So my buddy, you know, went to New York on a trip, and then I ended up going to New York and seeking out these mags. But it was like, you know, Vice, Frank 151. There was a mag called Tokyon. You know, Juxtapose came out a few years right before, or High Fructose and Juxtapose, which are California art-based mags, came out. You know, Shepard Fairey was doing street art. Like back then he would, if you mailed him a request, he would send you a packet. Shepard Fairey would send you a packet of these Andre the Giant Has a Posse, which are like, I don't even know how much they're worth now, but you know, he would do these wheat pastings, you know, so him and then Banksy. So it was like people taking art into their own hands kind of thing. You know, sneaker culture, stuff that was cool, hip hop, you know, Wu-Tang Clan. You know, it was like, how do you get to meet these people? You know, it was like a fantasy when you open up your books, you know, be like, oh, this magazine, man. You know, and then nobody in town had it. You know, it's like, it'd be different if I was in New York. I was in Bassett. So it was like, yeah, so I would, you know, trade it off to my friend. He'd be like, whoa, what is this, man? I'm like, yeah, people are living really dope lives away from here. You know, there's other ways to live our lives. It's not this. And so that was just inspiring because it was like, well, I didn't know then I would make a magazine. I just knew that I'd like to be, you know, I'd like to sit with Shepard Fairey. You know, I like to meet some of these artists that I was admiring. You know, how do I do that? Well, maybe, you know, I went to art school. And it was kind of like, you know, maybe art isn't specifically for me, like just in a traditional sense, but within a magazine, I can make my own art. You know, it'd give me an excuse to meet people. And that's what it is. It was like, oh, I really admire your work. I have a reason to interview you. Awesome. You know, I have a reason to talk to you. And then through that, you know, it was kind of like, oh, I'm learning something myself. And then all of a sudden you imagine these things, and then if you're able to imagine them hard enough that you can step into it, you know. So now I'm like, oh, I work with artists all the time. You know, if I call an artist, at least I have some credibility to have an interview or a talk or a musician, you know. Yeah, so I was just inspired by that, like just the idea that there was a lot more than what I was living at the time.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, that's awesome. Let's do the bonus interview section. I know you got a bunch of stuff on your plate today. You gotta get done, so we'll knock this out and we'll call it a day. Sound good?
Sure.
First bonus interview question. When you're actually relaxing and disconnecting from the world, I know you're working 84 hours a week or 100 hours a week.
It's slowed down some.
Okay.
I've got a lot more. We've got a whole team now, which is good.
Okay. So, but when you are relaxing and disconnecting from the world, what does that look like? What do you do for fun?
I love going to the beach.
Yeah.
You know, spending time with Aggie.
Aggie is
my girlfriend.
your girlfriend? Okay.
Yeah, and you know, friends and family, that kind of stuff. I still like going out and you know, seeing people on the Strip, which is like Main Street.
Okay.
I've been doing that for a long time.
You just go out and watch people?
You know, sometimes Aggie and I go out. Sometimes I meet friends, but you know, I like. Of course, I love them as friends, but I also love their stories. You know, I'm just invested in their story, and I've told them that before. You know, it's not weird. Like, you know, I've known you for 10, 15 years or whatever, and here you are doing this, and you know, I just find that really interesting. That kind of the narrative there. You know, I like hanging out with, of course, other artists. And seeing what they're working on, because again, that's just part of the overall story. And it's weird having been in. It'll be 20 years since 98 to 2018. Having been in one spot, you know, I'm invested. So it really makes it hard when I think about like moving away, because I'd like to move someplace warmer.
Okay. Yeah.
You know,
For sure.
and maybe work on another project.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I just that's what I do.
That's
I
what
just
you
like
do?
hanging out.
Cool. So question number 2. I hear you were a bit of a comic book nerd growing up. Is that a fair assessment? No?
Yeah, I think that you know, it's really weird seeing the Marvel movies and everything, and I had this feeling when I watched The Hobbit or the Lord of the Rings, right? Because like as a kid, man, it's just weird. Like pre-internet, I mean, what did you have? Like, I would go to the library all the time,
Yeah.
and so I'd pick up these books, and I don't even know how I learned about these books. I feel like it was harder to find information on books that really, you know, mattered.
Yeah.
You know, but I ended up somehow just accumulating and reading a lot of this stuff, and yeah, again, it's another of that escapism. Like when I saw the Frank 51s, you know, like whoa, you know, like,
Sure. Who was your favorite superhero as you were reading comic books?
I think that changes because I think as a teenager, Spider-Man connects with a lot of people.
Bro, that was my favorite growing up.
I mean, I
read a lot
think
of
it
Spider-Man.
connects because as a going through your teenage years and not understanding some stuff, and then kind of wishing that you had something special about yourself.
Yeah. Well, then also I connected with, because I was the dork in high school. So you have this dude that, you know, is completely dorky, is bottom of the totem pole.
Hey man, I was reading comic books a lot. I was in the same boat.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I was slaying the ladies. You know? I was just like, you know, I had my group and I played sports and I was in the band, but yeah, just it kind of connected like that. And then I also really like Conan the Barbarian.
Okay.
For probably the opposite reason.
Okay.
Complete, like I could never be like that.
Yeah.
You know, but he's slaying dragons and getting women, and and it's just like it's easy. He's killing like wizards and magic. Don't make sense. You know, there's a lot of things that as a kid it didn't make any sense either. You're like, I don't know how that works. You know, wish I could just slay that, and you know, everything's so black and white. But as you get older, it becomes more gray.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. So if you were to choose a superpower, would you rather? So here it comes. Would you rather have the ability to eat any form of matter, like Matter Eater Lad?
Okay.
It's a true
That's
comic book
okay.
character, or the ability to change the color of any object at will, like Color Kid or Rainbow Girl, also real characters.
Wow, I think, God, that would kind of feel like you'd have to adjust, wouldn't you? Like if your arm, like if you woke up one day and you didn't have a right arm, you know, like if you woke up one day and you're like, I can eat matter.
Yeah.
First off, I don't even know how you would find your power out, you know? Like, it'd have to be some kind of extreme situation where you're like, you know, there's a nuclear ball outside, and for some reason I have to save my family. Let me just try to eat it. And then everybody's like, wait a second, you survived. You're like, I did, you know? That's just, how do you know, that's just, you know, I don't even know how you would find that out. Now, the color thing, you would probably know that immediately, but then you might just be like, hey, maybe I'm going colorblind, you know?
Yeah.
Because how do you even know what, you know, this table is brown to me, but what is brown to you, right? So you're like, oh, I have a superpower. This thing is green now. And you're like, it's still brown. They're like, no, I'm telling you. So they might just put you in the hospital, you know? Like, you're losing it. So, I don't know. Both of those, I think, are very complicated.
You can't have both.
I would just eat matter, I guess.
Matter Eater. There you go.
Well, if I could eat whatever matter and not gain weight, that'd be great.
You wanted your cake to eat it too.
Yeah, I could just eat as many cookies as I want.
Yeah.
I could eat lead, not a problem. Yeah.
In nuclear reactors, as you first pointed out, which I would have never thought of. Good to know.
There you go.
Based on that alone, I think I would choose Matter Eater over a color changer.
You could save someone's life.
You could.
Yeah.
You have like an oncoming train that's coming at you. You just open your mouth and the train just goes.
Wait, does your mouth expand too, though?
I don't know, man. Sure. Why not?
Wow.
All right. So one place in Richmond most people don't know about, but it's worth checking out.
You talking restaurants or anything,
place? Man. Anything that you're like, bro, when you come into town. So people that aren't from Richmond, you're like, this is what you need to check out. Whether it's food or whether it's some kind of activity? If you're like the bird, that's the one thing you got to go make sure you do, whatever it is.
Yeah, the bird's fun. I mean, I like going out to Pocahontas State Park and kayaking.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's underappreciated. Like people are, if it's summertime, like, yeah, let's go out and have drinks and hang out and do all that stuff. If you want to see a show, there's all these great venues. But yeah, if we really want to hang out and have a few hours, let's enjoy the river. I think somehow that gets a little overlooked.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Belle Isle's always packed, but if you get a kayak and you're able to just paddle around and just hang out, it's awesome.
Yeah, dude, that's great. Okay, cool.
So
we'll do this. We'll end on a high note. What does the future look like for you? What 6 months to a year from now? What are you aiming to get accomplished?
I'd really like to connect the region with the Mag. I feel like the Mag almost in an import-export business of culture. Like there's so much cool stuff happening in Hampton Roads. I think Norfolk specifically, because I've been hanging out there more. Like I went there like 4 or 5 times last year. We have a client out there, Virginia Mocha at Virginia Beach. But more of the cultural organizations from there are reaching out to us. And so what we're seeing is, all right, there's a mural project here. There's all these great restaurants here. There's a brewery thing here. Kind of this 3-peg thing. Oh, Norfolk's doing the same thing. Virginia Beach is doing the same thing. Charlottesville is doing the same thing. It's becoming a regional thing. And I really like to try to understand how the magazine can connect all of those regions together by covering stories over there, finding writers in those areas. The hip hop scene in Norfolk is really good. They have a vibe district in Virginia Beach. I think some of the restaurants that are on the strip, the boardwalk, are starting to become a little more elevated. There's a really nice whiskey burger bar, like it's beach food. Oh, this cool little spot here with cool people, beach food, I think that trend will continue as more people from Richmond go to Virginia Beach and want that kind of thing, Even people at Virginia Beach want that kind of thing. So I think there's an opportunity for us, and we've been talking about it in-house for about 6 months. Because my Landon Schroeder is from Norfolk, and he's our lead editorial director. And so he has, all these stories from there, connections, and it's like, oh, well, we should be there. So I've been hanging out more there. That's in terms of the magazine, that's what I'd like to see. Richmond as the cultural hub for the region, because we do have something here that these other places want. And then how do we connect all of that? Because each one of those spots are very regional. They don't get along with each other. Traditionally, Richmond does not get along for some reason with Norfolk. And Virginia Beach doesn't get along with Norfolk. It's kind of like everybody's segmented in governance and in culture up until this point, but it's like, hey, we're all kind of doing the same thing. I'd like to have a listing of, Norfolk events this weekend, just in case I want to go out that way, and vice versa. I'd like to see a flow of people who go, oh, we're going to go hang out there because something cool's happening. And vice versa. So that's kind of the goal for this year, is trying to figure that part out.
Well, I don't know about you, but I got a lot out of this conversation. I found this discussion to be very inspiring, and I wanted to thank R. Anthony Harris for taking the time to come and talk with us. If you would like to see his work, head over to rvamag.com, and if you want to follow the magazine on social media, search at RVA Mag on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Once again, that's at RVA Mag. Lastly, if you're looking for ways to support Reaching Out, head over to our Facebook page and click the like button and share the page with your friends. You can also go on over to YouTube and iTunes and subscribe to follow us, and you can rate us and leave comments so everyone can hear about the show. Thanks again for listening to Reaching Out with Zack Carter. I'm Zack Carter, and we'll see you next week.